a couple of the different ideas of what somatic therapy is, and just kind of the differences, some of the different benefits, the different varieties, and some of the different populations that we might see in our clients. So looking at everything, what it boils down to first is kind of that mind-body connection piece. And then everything truly stems from there when we are exploring the idea of somatic therapy. So we'll kind of go into that, and that is our next step. One of the pioneers of dance movement therapy, which is in the umbrella of somatic therapies, was Marion Chase. She was kind of the founder of dance movement therapy. I have her book. It's a red one, and we always called it the Red Book. So it's like the Dance Movement Therapy Bible. And what she always said was, movement is a language that the body says that words cannot. And so I think that is such an important piece to remember, as well as just, like when we're talking about somatic therapy, we're talking about the body. And, like when we have all of these different moving parts and pieces to ourself, sometimes movement is one of those other languages that we can really start to incorporate to our day-to-day, and just using that as a processing tool as well is so important. So diving on into the mind-body connection, I think it's more of an experience than it is a connection. And so that's why I called this one the mind-body experience, because, if you ask somebody, what's the mind-body connection? Well, it's the connection between your mind and your body. It's like, obviously. And what does that mean? How do we experience that? How do we feel that? And so some of the different highlights of the mind-body experience is the mind-body connection involves the dynamic relationship between mental processes and physical health. It refers to the complex interactions between physiological states, physiological processes, and neural activities, and how these impact health and behavior. So kind of in studying these connections, researchers have found that physical conditions can shape our mental health, contributing to different mood disorders or cognitive challenges. So that's just really, truly reiterating that idea of the mind-body connection, and what we're feeling in our body is, trickling up into our mind, and what we're feeling in our mind, if we're really stressed out about something, we're going to be feeling that in our body. And so, breaking that down in simple language, it is about how thoughts, emotions, and behaviors influence bodily functions, and vice versa. So a lot of times we might, hear about, oh yeah, that's a top-down process, or that's a bottom-up process. And I think focusing in on that piece too, of just how we can really understand, like how do our thoughts impact, the rest of our experience, and how do our thoughts create this, like bigger experience for our body that's going to be a top-down process. If we're noticing, like I'm like emoting and I'm feeling a lot of different things, and my emotions are, like really stuck in my body, and then I start to notice that, it's a little bit more of a bottom-up process. And that is how a lot of the somatic therapies really start to engage in processing through a lot of the different things that we focus on in somatic therapy, by using that bottom-up process. And I'll get into that a little bit more in just a moment. And so more recently, studies have found that conditions such as chronic illness, hormonal imbalances, nutritional deficiencies, and even gut health disruptions influence mood, exacerbate anxiety and depression, and impact cognitive function. And so again, working in a holistic approach and really truly being able to see that, like our body is crying for help here. And these are some of the reasons, like how we can start to navigate that and how, like some of those red flags are coming up. By, like your body is telling you, hey, your digestion is off here. How, like, how is that impacting you? What is coming up for you? Are you really stressed out about something? Are you, like experiencing a lot of, like anxiety? And so that's kind of that whole domino effect there. So yeah, I think it's really important to, notice that this whole idea behind the mind-body connection is a little bit more of like Western world's, holistic approach and, like navigating the medical field that way, and just being able to treat the whole self. Is very, very important to kind of think about it that way. And so, yeah, these effects also work in the other direction as well. States such as stress, joy, and anxiety can trigger biochemical responses that affect immune function, heart rate, digestion, and even pain perception, which is really fascinating as well. I read a study one time about gratitude and how, like when we start to incorporate more gratitude into our whole self and into our world, it does lower a lot of those different heart rate variabilities. It lowers depressive states. It lowers all of these different things that are, like physical signs that, like, hey, you are doing, like better, you're feeling better. So I think that is really important to just kind of recognize the importance of the mind-body connection as a whole, and not just kind of looking at it as like, oh, it's our mind and body connected. It's like, and it goes much, much deeper than that too. So yeah, any questions about the mind-body connection? Okay, fabulous. All right, so what is somatic therapy? Great question. So what it is it's a body-centered approach to psychotherapy that emphasizes the connection between the mind and the body. So when we're thinking of somatic therapy, we want to think about it is relating to the body. So any type of therapeutic approach that incorporates the body will fall under the umbrella of somatic therapies. So what are some of those different somatic therapies? Well, great question again. So the differences are, these are just, like a little bit. We're just kind of scratching the surface of some different somatic therapies here, but I feel like these are some of the really important ones that I want to kind of highlight and bring to the table. So my bread and butter, as you know, is dance movement therapy. And so that is the psychotherapeutic use of movement to promote emotional, social, cognitive, and physical integration of the individual for the purpose of improving health and well-being. And so that is, kind of that whole understanding of, how movement is an expressive tool and how we can utilize that as a language to help process through whatever we might be experiencing. So, like being able to kind of think about it as, like if we're working through different traumas in our body, how are those being stored? And if we don't have the words to describe and understand like what is coming up for us, how can we utilize movement, or how can we utilize different gestures or even postures within our body to kind of put some of those different pieces together? And dance movement therapy can be, individual work, it can be group work, it can be couples, it can be, from age 0 to 150, everybody in between would benefit from the impacts of dance movement therapy. So a couple of other highlights about it is that movement is a language, and it's our first language. So thinking about when we first come into this world, we are, like our first movement is our first connection to the inside and outside world. And, noticing that nonverbal and movement communication begins, like as we are growing and developing, and it continues to expand throughout our lifespan. And thinking about dance movement therapists and how we really truly bring in that nonverbal language allows us to create this really strong connection between not only your mind and your body, but your spirit as well. And that's where a lot of that holistic understanding and approach can really truly come from with dance movement therapies. So I could dive into a whole bunch of different interventions and different ideas about dance movement therapy, but I will circle on back to that in just a moment after we go through a couple of these other kind of somatic experiences and somatic therapies. So dance movement therapy is different than somatic experiencing. So what somatic experiencing is it is a body-oriented approach to healing trauma that focuses on releasing physical and emotional tension stored in the body. So this is, really truly understanding kind of that whole idea of the body keeps the score and how trauma really gets stored in your body. A lot of times with somatic experiencing, this is something that we can bring to the table when we are navigating through PTSD. I saw this really amazing somatic experiencing intervention with a veteran that came back, and he was in a really terrible, situation. And so he had it's kind of this tick that every time, he would hear something, he would just, his eyes would shift, and then he would become, frozen in this trauma response. And so they were able to kind of utilize some of these smaller movements and being able to, drop in and kind of get into this repetitive flow of repatterning that movement for him so that he wasn't jumping into that trauma response of freezing while he was exploring and navigating through some of these different movements. Because a lot of times when we experience trauma, say it's, a car accident and we're looking over, in our blind spot, sometimes that looking over your shoulder at your blind spot can be just that trigger into that that trauma response that we have. And so, somatic experiencing focuses in on some of those smaller movements so that we can, like I said, repattern that and start to release a little bit of the emotional and physical tension that gets stored in our body there. So thinking about the difference between dance movement therapy and somatic experiencing, dance movement therapy is that expressive therapy. So you are able to kind of explore and process and integrate, movement into your, approach of being able to communicate what's happening internally into, your external world. And, I feel like the somatic experiencing, the difference between that, it's a little bit more focused on the step-by-step of, all right, how do we release a little bit of that tension? And it's a little bit more A to B, B to C, whereas, dance movement therapy is kind of this, like we can go from A to C to Z to D, and that is the way that we want to approach it. And that is, like very much meeting the person where they are at and using it as a more creative outlet for them. And so then kind of breaking it down even more, looking at another somatic therapy approach is, kind of the basis of everything here is, being able to utilize some breath work and some body awareness into, like our daily, experiences that we have with clients. So, like breathing exercises, controlled breath create a release of tension and stress in the body. Body awareness allows one to drop into the body and notice sensations while building your mindfulness practice as well. So we'll explore a little bit more about that body awareness in just a moment. But yeah, lots of good breath exercises help to ground you and really help you to fully understand where we're at in space, how that can be such a mindful experience there, and how we can really utilize our breath as part of our body, which again is the whole premise of somatic therapy. And then just a little side note, EMDR is kind of its own entity, and it is joining a little of body awareness and trauma processing. It is considered a somatic therapy because of, like we're using the body, we're using our eyes, we're using those different repetitive movements to kind of process through some of the different trauma experiences that we might have. And so I think just being able to kind of like understand what that all looks like and feels like. And so EMDR is a psychotherapy treatment that is designed to alleviate the distress associated with traumatic memories. And so that one is pretty interesting too. There's a lot of different studies, and you have to go through a pretty extensive training to be able to be considered, that you're trained in EMDR, because you are working with trauma and the body and, like very intense experiences with people. We really have to take that trauma-informed approach with EMDR. And it's not just, oh, I took a CEU and now we're good to go. It's like, no, it's a whole thing. Same thing with dance movement therapy and somatic experiencing. Those are all, like trainings, and, like dance movement therapy is its own, course, and we have to go through, I think my master's program was 60 credits. So there's a lot to, like learn and process and do all those goodies. So looking at those, any questions or clarifications about the different somatic therapies that I presented to you here? Okay. All right. Well, with all of that, yes, those are kind of the ways and the routes of, like utilizing some somatic therapies. And it's like, well, why even use those, right? And so the benefits of somatic therapy, we've been talking a lot about healing from trauma. And so somatic therapy is particularly effective in helping individuals process and heal from trauma by addressing the physical manifestations of trauma in the body. And that's kind of where that somatic experiencing can really come in. And so how do we, and it's in the name of it too, right? How are we experiencing that tension? How are we experiencing that trauma? And how do we work to alleviate our system of that? And so that's a really important piece of the somatic experiencing therapeutic process there. And again, dance movement therapy is a huge piece of all of these different things as well. Being able to utilize it with emotional regulation by increasing body awareness and emotional processing. Somatic therapy can help individuals better regulate their emotions and reduce reactivity to triggers. And so that body awareness piece is huge, right? And kind of thinking about, what is my body feeling today? Am I just a bundle of nerves? Am I, like super stressed out? Is my, are my shoulders like up to my ears right now because I have so much stress, so much, overwhelm, all of the different things happening, but being able to put all of those different pieces together, that is huge, right? We need to be able to kind of call out some of those different emotions that we're experiencing in order to help regulate the emotions that we have. I mean, how many times do we hear clients say, like, I don't even know how I'm feeling right now. It's just, like, how's your body feeling? I don't know. And it's like, okay, well, let's stop to, like figure that out. Like, do you have butterflies in your stomach right now? Is your heart racing? Maybe we're a little sweaty. And it's like, well, yeah, I do have all of those different things happening right now. And it's just being able to kind of sit with some of those different, like noticings and some of those different feelings that we have. And then being able to say, okay, this is where we're at. Where do we want to go from here? And just really, truly developing that understanding that this is all a process and we got to start somewhere. So, kind of having that improved body awareness is so important to become more attuned to their, physical sensations, which can be helpful for managing stress and anxiety. And a lot of other emotional challenges as well. I think that is so impactful, and like the foundation for all somatic therapy is that we need to know and understand this language of our body. It's kind of like the question, your body is constantly talking to you. Are you listening to it? And so I think that piece is something that, like we can really take away from this, where it's like, if we're ignoring all of the signs and signals that we're stressed out, if we're ignoring, that we're angry that we didn't get the job promotion, if we're not listening to ourselves because, like we've got a million and one other things happening and we're just, like putting all of our needs on the back burner, we are going to snap. Yeah, we are not going to be regulated. We are going to have a tough time, like taking it one step at a time and reducing all of those really unpleasant, uncomfortable emotions that we have. And a lot of times I like to frame it as, like, okay, we have these unpleasant, uncomfortable emotions in our body, and our body is, like pushing us to these feelings of discomfort because it's trying to tell us that something is off. It's trying to almost like annoy us, like the little sister, like, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, to be like, oh my gosh, turn, stop, look, listen, what are we doing? And is there a need that's not being met? Is there something that's coming up? Am I, like quieting myself? Is my voice being silenced when, like I need to speak up? And so really truly listening to all of those, different signals that your body is constantly giving to you, and being able to, like find that trust within yourself and really learn that language to be like, okay, if I know that my, if I'm feeling a lot of tension, like in my throat, okay, that's me, like that's my body saying, you got to speak up. You got to say something here. And, that's all part of the work. And that is such a learning experience. And it is different for every single individual that, like we're going to work with here. So, sometimes it's, okay, my throat's feeling tight because, like I might be having strep throat, or I might be, like a little nervous about something, or I might be angry, or I might be sad, or it might be because I'm ready to cry. And so it's just so important to know that the language that your body has is true and authentic to you. And what does that look like? And how do we, like really honor that in this experience? And know that there is no right or wrong way of, like how our body is trying to speak to us and understand some of those different experiences that we have. So, I could go on and on about the different benefits of somatic therapy, but yeah, do we kind of see how all of that really truly is super impactful about where things are at, and just kind of processing through some of those different ideas. Cool. Excellent. All right, so kind of diving into what we can do as clinicians, some different interventions for clients in session. How do we start to, like incorporate more somatic therapy into sessions? And so I think the first things first, we have to become a little bit more familiar with the language. And, like what I've been kind of talking about just now is that, we all speak different languages all around the world. Our body is no different. We have to start by encouraging our clients to learn the language of their body. What do the different tensions mean for them? What do different sensations in their body indicate? How are emotions showing up in their body, right? If you have a client say, oh my gosh, I was so mad about, like this situation. Okay, well, let's become a little curious about that. How do you know you were mad? What was your body telling you in that moment? It's like, oh, well, I don't know. I was just mad. And it's like, let's back it up even more and start to understand what are some of those different sensations that your body gives you. Like, did you feel a wave of heat kind of like go up the back of your neck? Did you feel, like your fists ball up? Did you feel, like tension or, like a spiky energy in your heart? There's no right or wrong answer, or there's no right or wrong description to how those different emotions are showing up in your body. It's just being able to figure out how do we understand that for ourselves, because that's going to help us translate into, okay, we've got our body awareness now, and now we can really work on emotional regulation on top of understanding. It's like, okay, if I can identify that first little signal that my body gives me when I'm angry is, like a little, like sweaty palm action. It's like, okay, if I'm feeling that sweaty palm, that's my indication that I need to take a step away. And that's my indication that I need to start, like figuring out how am I going to regulate myself, because I know where this train is going. And I know that I'm going to need a couple of my different coping skills, not let my anger escalate to the point where, like I am not feeling like my best self. And so I think that that's a huge piece of the body awareness and how that is connected to emotional regulation. And so that kind of all ties into being able to ask the question, what is your body feeling right now? And establishing a stronger connection to present moment and body-based awareness. So kind of understanding how, like we can bring in, that mindfulness and bring in, like, what does that even mean for us? Mindfulness is kind of that focus of what's happening right here, right now. And, noticing and reflecting some of those different things back to our clients can be very beneficial, and just navigating and strengthening that understanding of, like what present moment awareness is. And then, kind of thinking about too, are we able to kind of add in some different movements or gestures into ways to explain emotions, to kind of like foster a stronger connection of self-expression? Because sometimes words aren't enough, right? It's like, sometimes it's like, oh, just, I gotta shake it off right now. And like, okay, then actually do that for yourself. Or, like, I just feel like I need a hug right now. And so it's like, okay, then give yourself a hug, and being able to really notice and utilize what are some of those, like different movements. Even going back to the anger example, it's like, well, when I'm angry, like I tend to, like really ball up my fists, and it's like, okay, then, like, what does that feel like now to kind of, like do that for yourself, and just, like being able to notice and recognize that, like we're constantly moving as human beings, and, being able to acknowledge and listen to that, that's a huge piece of it all. So, yeah, just a couple of different ideas of being able to get some more somatic experiencing and some more somatic therapy into our different sessions. And yeah, just kind of wrapping everything up. Some of the different populations that benefit from somatic therapies, like we've been talking through this whole time. Trauma, PTSD, very, very important for somatic therapy, and anxiety, depression, chronic pain, addiction. I mean, pretty much any and all can benefit from strengthening that mind-body connection, but it's just being able to kind of figure out and pinpoint how do we approach that, and how do we navigate through some of those different experiences. So I believe that is it. Oh, and some just little helpful websites. If you guys are curious, interested in a little bit more advanced movement therapy, you can always go to adta.org. That is the American Dance Therapy Association. Somatic Experiencing is trauma healing, and somatic experiencing, that is Peter Levine. He is very much focused in on the somatic experiencing, just, mind-body connection stuff. That's a really good article just to kind of bring in some more understanding. And EMDR kind of has its own, like website and understandings there. But just as like a little side note, like I mentioned before, DMT, SE, and EMDR all require additional education and training to utilize their maximum benefit. So take a peek at some of these different websites for more information on each one of those. And then also to kind of sprinkle in another somatic therapy is just it's not so much a therapy, but it's a theory, and it's the polyvagal theory too. And so that really tries to explore safety and security, and being able to utilize your vagus nerve, and how do we kind of like quiet our vagus nerve. And it works a lot with, kind of your fight or flight system as well, and your automatic stress response. And so just kind of being able to repattern and learn how to, like feel safe and connected within your body. And again, that's all through experiencing trauma and different things like that. So yes, I've got a really awesome polyvagal exercise book here, and it is by Deb Dana. She's kind of one of the main people in polyvagal. It was started and kind of brought to the attention by Stephen Porges. He's kind of the mastermind behind polyvagal. And so this is 50 client-centered practices of just being able to use a couple of different, 50 different exercises where we can start to, kind of get a little bit deeper in reconnecting and finding some safety within ourselves. And that's been really helpful. I use that a lot in residential. And then again, going back to my favorite, The Body Keeps the Score. This is kind of the Cliff Notes version of it. And so it's just kind of the highlights reel of what, like the book is talking about and what it incorporates. So that's summarized for busy people. And then I also have a workbook that goes along with The Body Keeps the Score. And so that's just a quick little summary of the book, and then being able to, like put some of those different ideas into practice as well. Just if we're, like thinking that our client needs a little bit more, like body felt stuff, and we're just like, ooh, I don't know how to kind of navigate that. The workbook for The Body Keeps the Score can be very helpful in kind of guiding us and utilizing some of those different ideas. And yeah, being able to dive on in from there. So any noticings, reflections, thoughts, hopes, dreams, wishes?
I think one of the things that came up for me, there's a few, so I'll try and make it brief, but the first is just thoughts on, it seems like our society really values the lack of movement, like from an early age, like sit at the table, be still, sit in class, pay attention, don't move, don't fidget. And then as soon as you start having some of these movements, it's like labeled like ADHD, inattentive, too chaotic, and it's like, so how, just kind of speaking on that, like how do you, for me, it feels like we're so used to having to ignore our bodies, like it's valued to ignore your body and push and do more and more.
Mm-hmm.
I could see it would be very difficult in a therapy session to say like, hey, we're actually going to start listening to our bodies.
Yeah.
We actually find value in what your body's saying.
Mm-hmm.
And we're no longer going to ignore it. We're actually going to be curious about it.
Right.
That in itself, I feel like could be really jarring, but also really freeing. So
Mm-hmm.
any feedback on that?
It takes time. Yeah. And it takes, like almost to, I don't want to say like a breaking point, but, like your client has to be ready. And it's not like, especially if you're working with trauma or you're working with kind of those very regimented, I was never able to, listen to this, or I was never able to, like access my emotions. And I was told to, like shut it down from, like day one. It's like, okay, we have to kind of repattern some of those different thoughts. We have to work with thought reframing to be able to even look at some of these different ideas and to kind of like expand where we're at and where we're going. And one of the really cool things within dance movement therapy is that we talk about expanding your movement repertoire. And so being able to just kind of bring in the idea that we're always growing, we're always expanding, and we're able to understand what that looks like. And, like it's almost, like learning a new skill, right? You pick up a violin and you know how to play like one key or one chord. And it's like, okay, over time, you're going to develop that skill. Over time, you're going to develop and you're going to be, like playing the next symphony. And, same thing happens with our movement. Same thing happens with understanding our body. It is like, we kind of have to take a very elementary approach at the beginning, because it's like, okay, you got to sit up before you can crawl. You got to crawl before you can kind of stand up. You got to stand up before you can walk. You got to walk before you run. And it is very much like that. And, like being able to utilize somatic therapy as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like, starting this conversation with the mind-body connection and looking at maybe a client comes in and they have chronic pain or chronic illness, like could that then be an indicator of perhaps that ignoring of the body, right? Like,
yeah,
there's something there that's manifesting in a way,
mm-hmm.
if we want to say is stuck there or has contributed to, right? But so I guess, again, just like an observation or how you frame this with clients of like, hey, like any thoughts on maybe this chronic illness not just being a body-based thing, but us working on it here in therapy because of like the ignoring of your body, right? Like,
yeah,
I could see that conversation being so helpful, but also like difficult
yeah.
for folks to come in and be like, hold on, why am I talking to my therapist about my chronic illness?
Right. Yes. Well, one of the things that's really impactful to, like kind of put the pieces together a lot of the times, when did your chronic illness start? Where did that come from? It didn't just fall out of the sky one day. And so I think being able to kind of have that, like as part of the conversation too, and so that they can put some of the different pieces together, that's going to be very helpful. A lot of the approach with somatic therapy is that, okay, we're going to shine a light on some of these different highlights. And, it's up to you as the client to put those, like different ideas together and to, like really focus on how does all of this make sense to you? Because again, at the end of the day, this is your body, this is your experience, this is how you want to be navigating your life. And so let's, like make the most of this and really try to understand how we can make the most of this. So, okay. Any other thoughts, noticings, reflections? I can share the little slideshow with you guys too, just so that you have all of those reference points and things too.
No, I think this was like super helpful. And personally, I think came at like a really good time because I've been kind of having this talk with one of my clients who she has like a lot of trauma, and we've done a lot of just like the base work of it, but we're both kind of starting to see like she might need a little bit more. From what I learned today, like somatic experiencing would probably be really good for her. So it was just like an interesting and kind of like reassuring presentation to be like, okay, everything that she is experiencing, yes, needs more of this like specialty now because she's like had time away from that traumatic moment and can kind of allow herself to start seeing the connections of like, okay, this like pain that I feel every single day in my body, or this like little illness that none of my doctors can really explain to me, maybe is kind of connected to this. So
Totally.
Really helpful. Yeah. And I don't know if you have any, this is just like a side note, but any like referrals for therapists who are specialized in somatic experiencing.
Yes.
That would be lovely. I would love that.
Yes.
But yeah, this is good.
But yeah, I have to double check and see where they're at in the world now. But yes, I will
Amazing.
Get those over to you for sure.
Okay. Thank you. No, this was really helpful. And yeah, with the chronic illness, I have also too a client who struggles with a chronic illness, but we're starting to see that it's like related to trauma. And something that she said, which I feel like sometimes a lot of our clients will like share, like, oh, I saw this thing on TikTok, or oh, I saw this thing on Instagram, and like it finally clicked for me. She was telling me how she was watching like the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and one of the women on there has like this chronic skin disease, and it was linked to a traumatic incident from when she was younger. She started getting therapy for it, and we're starting to see it like go away and leave her skin.
Yeah.
So of course it's like, oh my gosh, I saw this on TV, and it made me realize, and it's like, whatever you can see and like can help you. But yeah, I think like that connection, people are really starting to just see it more out in like the external world, not just like in our world where we see it too, which is really cool.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the body keeps the score, and I will keep saying that until the cows come home. So yeah, absolutely. So the more that we can like process and get in there, the more we're going to be able to clean house and have a nice house to live in.
And also too, going off that, like sometimes it can be there has been some sort of trauma, whether it's in your adult life or either childhood. But sometimes it's also just noticing that maybe you weren't even taught these skills. So some folks will be like, well, my childhood was great, everything's fine. And it's like, okay, well, even if that's true and there's nothing to dig into there, like you may not have been taught to value your body and listen to your body and tune into that. So even if there's not trauma, it doesn't necessarily mean that there was also healing and health that was present there either. So there doesn't have to be shame or blame of your childhood, but also an understanding of, now we can learn the tools and maybe start tapping in, tuning in a way we haven't before.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Katie. This was so helpful. And yeah.
Okay. And remember to smift too. Yes. That is so much of the body awareness piece. So yes, sensations, memories, images, feelings, thoughts, smift it out when in doubt. All right.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you. We will add the smift.
Yes. All right. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.